What a wild week of fantasy football we just experienced. Obviously, we had some massive breakout games for some underdog players in fantasy football. And of course, we've still got the 2 Monday night games tonight. But of course, we need to get the jump on week 4 fantasy football. And that's what we're doing today. We're going through 6 buy low trade targets to buy before week 4 fantasy football. And I also find it very pointless to just tell you guys, go out and trade for them without telling you guys what tier of guys you should be sending in exchange for that player. So that is also what I will do with every single trade target in this video. I'll be up all night filming this one, man. I am up here. It's 1 in the morning. I'm filming now. I'll be up making sure it gets out to you guys on time on Monday. So please make sure to go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support of the channel. So let's go ahead and just dive into these guys right now, man. The first guy on my list here is honestly one of my favorite trade targets of the week, and it's Zay Flowers of the Baltimore Ravens here. Now, Zay Flowers, you may know that I took an L on Zay Flowers earlier in the season. During the pre-draft process, I was telling you guys, don't draft Zay Flowers. Do not draft him. I took my L, like I said, because I saw the involvement, and the involvement has remained consistent, and we're moving forward with the new information that we have. Zay Flowers, the information we have with him is that he is the clear wide receiver 1 in this Baltimore offense. And here's the thing about being a wide receiver 1 in Baltimore Ravens offense. It used to be where it really didn't have that much upside. If you were a Marquise Brown back in the day, there really wasn't too much upside. You were getting like 6 to 8 targets per game maximum. It's different now. It's so much different. Zay Flowers, through 3 games this year, has 11.7 targets per game. That's way higher than Marquise Hollywood Brown ever had with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, of course, I think Zay's a better player than Marquise Hollywood Brown, but this doesn't change the fact that Baltimore is indeed throwing the ball more this year. And he had a pretty good week 1. When you look back to what he did in week 1, it was pretty good. I mean, he had plenty of targets in that game, and he had a good amount of yards, and he was pretty good in fantasy that week. But the past 2 weeks have been a little bit lower level. Like, when you look at the last 2 weeks for Zay Flowers, they haven't really done too much. But keep in mind this. He's done all of this year without scoring a single touchdown yet. That is going to change 100%, man, because look at what the matchups he's got to take advantage of over the next month. He's got Cleveland, then Pittsburgh, Tennessee's awful pass defense, Detroit's pass defense, Arizona's pass defense, and Seattle's pass defense. He's got matchups to take advantage of. This team is also going to be pissed off coming off a bad loss to the Indianapolis Colts without Anthony Richardson, man. The beautiful thing about this one too is that he doesn't need to be priced as a wide receiver 1. When you're trading for him, you could send someone like a Miles Sanders coming off a good week, Rachaad White, Jacoby Myers, and Courtland Sutton coming off a good week. That's the range of guys that you could probably package together, maybe not trade straight up, but package together for a deal for Zay Flowers. Because the upside and the reason you buy him low right now is because the upside is higher than what he has been showing us so far this season. So moving on to our next guy here, we've got another high-end upside guy. It's Nico Collins of the Houston Texans, man. Now, I know to the average fantasy football player who doesn't really pay super close attention, the general sentiment about Houston fantasy football players is there's not much upside attached to them, right? Like, over the past several years, Davis Mills has been the quarterback, and the offensive upside has just not been that high from a fantasy football perspective. And overall, just Houston is one of those teams that has just a general fantasy football stink attached to all their players here. But what I will ask you is this. Did you know that Nico Collins was the wide receiver 8 in half PPR heading into week 3? Because that's exactly where he was sitting before this down game that he just had in week 3. Now, we've discussed Nico Collins a lot over the past several weeks on this channel. So if you're new, you may not have known that. But if you aren't new and you do know that, we've been talking about it so much, that doesn't come as a surprise to you. We've been talking about Nico Collins plenty. And like I said, this was a bad game for Nico Collins. His average is about to drop for sure. But here's the thing that we need to realize, and this is why it's so important for me specifically to watch these games for you guys. Because 1, I love football. I could watch football for the rest of my life and be totally happy. And 2, there's a lot of fantasy football YouTubers out there who I don't really think watch football. Because Nico Collins and the Houston Texans, they were basically in control of this game the entire way. Jacksonville was in a hole all day long. And what that did was it allowed Houston to run the ball more, and they ran more in week 3 than they had in week 1 and also in week 2. That's because they had control of this ball game. And really, it was a Tank Dell type of day, which, by the way, we'll talk about Tank Dell later on Monday afternoon. Just so you know, keep an eye out for that waiver wire video that will be coming up in a couple of hours here. Nico Collins has better days ahead of him. That's a fact here. Houston is not going to control the game like they did against Jacksonville many more times in week 3. And honestly, with the Houston stink on their fantasy football players and just a bad week that Nico Collins had, I think you could get away with sending a guy like Romeo Doubs, Adam Thielen, Terry McLaurin, and maybe in addition get some more assets in addition to Nico Collins. I think you can get away with that stuff. And if you really want to shoot for a big return, maybe try to send Garrett Wilson away and get Nico Collins. Because to me personally, this is a situation where Nico Collins is going to have much more upside moving forward, as he has shown over the past 2 weeks. Week 3 was just a bad week for him. Moving on to our next guy here. This is probably going to sound a little bit crazy, and you might just say you're just trying to save face for a guy that you had all offseason you're ranked on. If you're new, I am big on Justin Fields. And Justin Fields was the guy that I said has the potential to break fantasy football in 2023. Well, he hasn't done it yet, but I'm trading for him right now, and let me tell you why. So last week I did a video and we discussed what guys we are panicking on and what guys maybe some people are overreacting on. And I had some mild panic with Justin Fields last week. It's been pretty bad for Justin Fields. Let's not sugarcoat this at all. Now, a big part of analyzing fantasy football players from an analysis perspective, a big part of analysis on these guys is about perspective and it's about relativity. So when we look at a guy like Justin Fields, a bad game for him, since he has rushing upside associated with him, is like a 13-point game, a 10-point game, a 15-point game. Those are considered pretty bad weeks for a guy like Justin Fields. Now, if you're comparing him to a guy like maybe Jared Goff, who could have like a 6-point game, a 5-point game, even Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, 3 to 5 point games this year. It hasn't been that bad for Justin Fields because the floor is still high with that rushing upside that he presents. Now, I also said last week when I discussed Justin Fields at length that I would not personally trade Justin Fields for Kirk Cousins or Jared Goff. Other people will do this though. That's the range we're at right now. He is coming off a really bad week against the Kansas City Chiefs, and a lot of people watched that game and he had a 50% completion percentage in that game. It was awful, man. It was awful. But here's the reality. This is the type of upside we want to shoot for right here. We all know the upside is there. I mean, you're thinking back to last year, he went off in the second half of the season when Chicago was basically out of contention for playoff hopes, and they were just trying to see what they had in Justin Fields. I think they've gotten away from what he really does best, and what he does best is running around. I think that's going to change here, and the schedule significantly lightens up over the next 5 weeks. Look at what we've got. Denver, Washington, Minnesota, Las Vegas, and the Los Angeles Chargers. This schedule significantly lightens up for Justin Fields, and it's not that the Bears are any kind of good team. They're going to be one of the worst teams on the field in most of those matchups. But from a fantasy football perspective and those teams defensively, there's going to be better weeks ahead for Justin Fields. And listen, it's important to know with this one, it may not work out. It very well might not work out at all, but the price is right now. And since the price is right, we got to shoot for the upside. That's what we are all about on this channel, is finding the upside at the right price in fantasy football. Now, moving on to our next guy here. Again, this is another situation very similar to Justin Fields. The price is right now. It's Calvin Ridley of the Jacksonville Jaguars here. So this is a similar story to Zay Flowers a little bit as well. Calvin Ridley, I said don't draft him on this channel during the offseason. I was saying do not draft this guy. He hasn't played in 3 years basically. Do not draft him. Then he had week 1 and he was excellent, and I took my L after that week. Maybe I shouldn't have taken my L so soon on him. Now, I'm just kidding. I'm really just kidding about this because he's on this list for a reason here. This situation reminds me a lot of A.J. Brown and Jamar Chase. And the reason I say that is because Jamar Chase, A.J. Brown, they already have established greatness over the last several years, right? And Calvin Ridley had greatness back in his heyday in 2020, but it's been a while since we've seen him, so a lot of people like me were like, how do we even know this guy's good anymore? Well, he reestablished that greatness in week 1 this year. He was excellent that week, and everyone was back on board with Calvin Ridley, including myself. Now he's had 2 straight stinkers, just like A.J. Brown and Jamar Chase have to start out their seasons. Jacksonville's offense has sputtered in the last 2 weeks. It's been really hard to watch, actually. It's really interesting how bad they've been. But here's the key. The key is the involvement. He has 8.7 targets the last 2 weeks. So it's not like he's literally just fallen off the face of the earth and completely become irrelevant in this offense. He leads the team in targets through 3 weeks still. That's a very important piece. He's not being ignored. He's just had some very down weeks in fantasy football. Things are going to get better here. Jacksonville's offense is going to rebound. They've got a good coach. They've got a good quarterback. They've got great weapons. The offense just needs a little bit of time. And honestly, like I said, the price is right for Calvin Ridley to trade someone like a Brandon Ayuk type. Like, that's the range that we're in right now in that tier of guys. I'll prefer Calvin Ridley because I know he's the wide receiver 1 in his own offense. Now, moving down to our next guy, my favorite trade target of the week, CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. And here's the reason he's my favorite, because this is honestly a very interesting case here with CeeDee Lamb. Lots of people think he's elite. Like, a lot of people are not saying that CeeDee Lamb sucks, man. Like, that's not really what's happening in the fantasy football community. But there are some people who do think he's always been overhyped. I know this because I live around these types of people. I live in Texas, and a lot of people are Cowboys fans here, but there are also a lot of CeeDee Lamb detractors. I mean, listen, 2022 was the first year that CeeDee Lamb had a top 15 fantasy finish. That's definitely something to note here, and people remember that stuff. Now, he was great in week 2. He had a great week 2 in fantasy football. They had that game against the Jets where they absolutely destroyed all their team morale. But he's coming off a bad week 3. And really, the Cowboys as a team are. I mean, when you lose to the Arizona Cardinals, you're coming off a really bad week. So, CeeDee Lamb's coming off a bad week. And the inconsistency is why he's left out of the category of guys like Stephon Diggs and Devontae Adams. That's why he's left out of that class. I think he's great. I think he's great, and I would probably imagine you think he's great. If you don't, let me know in the comments if you think he's overrated. I think CeeDee Lamb is a great player in fantasy football. Like I said, Dallas had a bad week this week. This was a terrible week for them. Was it because of the Trayvon Diggs injury and it messed with their heads? I don't know. I really, really don't. Overall, CeeDee Lamb has been a little bit overwhelming this year. When you see it on the screen right now, it's not that he's been bad, but you want more from a guy you probably drafted in like the high or middle end of the first round of your drafts this year. I think this is a rare time where you can get a really good value on a true wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. I'm looking at guys like Brandon Ayuk, Jordan Addison, Garrett Wilson, those types of guys to package together with a guy like CeeDee Lamb. That's a money trade to me because this guy is going to produce when it matters the most when you get closer to fantasy playoff time. Well, our last guy on here, it's a reminder we're trading for an injured player right now, and it's Austin Eckler of the Los Angeles Chargers right now. It's time to trade for an injured player right now. Whether it's Cooper Kupp, Jonathan Taylor, my favorite of the bunch is Austin Eckler. Now, obviously, Austin Eckler, we don't have a ton of information on when he's coming back, but I did read today that he possibly could return in week 4. And the reason you trade for him right now is because look across your league. The guy who owns Austin Eckler, he may very well be 1-2 or even 0-3. That's a legitimate possibility for the Austin Eckler owner. And at this time, after week 3, people start to really, really panic. If you're 0-3, if you're 1-2, and the upside looks grim, you're looking to make some moves and you can get desperate. We know what Austin Eckler could do. Obviously, you see it on the screen. That was just his week 1 performance. If that owner is panicking, try your best to fleece that guy. I mean, absolutely fleece him. Send Brian Robinson. Same James Conner. Package those guys together with another wide receiver and get Austin Eckler. Last year, I traded Keenan Allen during his injured season and Jeff Wilson for Jamar Chase. These trades are possible. You find someone who's desperate and then you take advantage of that desperation right there. This is a situation where you got to shoot for the upside of when Austin Eckler returns. try to send that offer today. So let me know who you are actively targeting and trying to get rid of before week 4 fantasy football. And our waiver wire video will be coming out later today. Make sure to keep an eye out for that waiver wire targets video, and I will see you guys in that video.